Some of you may have already seen that I made a video about the first attempt at IVF that I did with my own eggs that didn't work. I was almost 47 at the time and my eggs were just too old, and I realized that I was going to need to use a donor egg. And if you haven't seen that video, you can see it here. So in that video, I talked about how I had to go through a process of grieving the loss of my own genetics and how I wasn't going to be able to have my own biological child, and how I actually came to peace about using donor eggs. So I definitely recommend you watch that video if you're in that process right now of coming to terms with that. So the point when I realized that was in April 2020, just after my IVF attempt didn't work. And I immediately jumped into researching donor eggs and how I could get hold of a donor egg in Australia. It's really, really difficult here. It's actually really difficult to get hold of a donor egg here in Australia because the requirements under Australian legislation are so strict. It's just so difficult. For a woman to donate her eggs here, she has to do it completely for free, not be paid any money at all. And she can't be an anonymous donor. She has to be what's called an open ID donor, which means that at age 18, the child can contact her. And she also has to be willing to do 2 counseling sessions. So that's a lot. And when you think about it, donating eggs is not like donating sperm. You don't just like look at a magazine and hand in some sperm. To donate eggs, you have to do a round of IVF. You have to take injections day after day after day. You have to go into surgery and have egg retrieval surgery under general anesthetic, and then you have to recover from that. So that's a huge thing to do. I've done that in my round of IVF. That was big. I'm sure many of you have done that on your fertility journey. To do that for free, for no money, purely out of the goodness of your own heart, it's amazing. And there aren't that many women who would do it. So that's why there just aren't that many egg donors in Australia. You could get embryos that have already been created from egg and sperm that are left over from other people's IVF rounds. And that's what a lot of people do in Australia. But I really did want to choose my own egg donor and my own sperm donor and create my own baby rather than using leftovers from someone else's fertility journey. But I did look into it. But at the time, April 2020, the waiting lists were like 2 years long, even for donated embryo. So I realized that wasn't going to be an option. So at that time, usually what women were doing in Australia, if they needed a donor egg, they were having to go overseas, usually to Spain or South Africa or Greece or something like that. And I talked in my other video about how I found a clinic in Russia that I really wanted to go to. But the thing was, at that time, we were in April 2020, we were a month into COVID, and Australia had closed its borders and we were not allowed to fly. So I basically waited the whole year. And at the end of that year, in December, when I started to really think, well, maybe I'm just going to have to go to Russia somehow during this pandemic, I found out that actually at that time they had changed the rules and you could now import eggs from overseas into Australia. Oh my God, it was such a relief. So when I looked into it, I found out that there was a clinic pretty close to here, 40 minutes drive up north on the Gold Coast, that was importing eggs into Australia from the World Egg Bank in the United States in Arizona. So I decided to work with them. So I immediately wrote to the World Egg Bank and asked them a million questions, and they allocated me someone who was my sort of liaison woman at the World Egg Bank, and I just had so many emails back and forth because I just had so many questions, as you can imagine. I'll share a lot of what I learned in this video. She was really lovely because she herself had used donor eggs. She'd been the recipient of donor eggs, so she really knew a lot about it. So I signed up for an account on the World Egg Bank website and I started looking through their catalogue of egg donors. She told me that most of the donors on that site had already had their egg donor cycles and their eggs had been frozen and they were ready to be given to the recipient, but that there were a few newer donors and donors that were just coming into the World Egg Bank and they hadn't yet been through their cycles, so their profiles would say coming soon, and that meant that they hadn't yet had their eggs collected. And she also told me how to search on the World Egg Bank website to find donors who would satisfy the Australian requirements, because as I said, they're much stricter than the American requirements and the requirements in most countries. So most of the egg donors on the World Egg Bank site did not satisfy Australian law. So I had to enter certain search terms. I think I had to enter outside the US and I had to enter premium or something like that, to make sure that the donors that showed up were ones that actually would legally be allowed to be used in Australia, in that they did not give their eggs for money, they were open ID donors, and they'd done the 2 counselling sessions. So that's a lot to ask of a donor. So as I said before, there aren't that many donors who will do that. Even out of the whole of the United States, there wasn't that many egg donors who satisfied that. So I still really was only able to look at a handful of donors. And as well as there being not that many donors to choose from, the thing that was really hard about it was that there just wasn't much information about the donors. It was such a different experience from choosing my sperm donor. Some of you may have seen my video I've already made about how I chose my sperm donor. If you haven't, you can see it here. When you're choosing a sperm donor, you've just got so much information. It's more information than internet dating. Like, they've just got essays and pictures and audio tracks, and they write their life story, and they tell you everything about themselves. They answer a million questions. They do personality tests, all that stuff. You didn't get any of that at the World Egg Bank. And I think the reason why not is because, think about it, it's super easy to donate sperm. You just get a little white cup, you give in your sperm. Men all over the world are donating sperm all the time. And so the sperm banks are filled with sperm, and there's so many sperm banks, and they're all competing against each other, trying to get your business. So they're just giving more information. Choose our sperm bank. We've got more information. Choose us, because they're competing. Whereas it's the opposite situation with egg donors. There's so few egg donors, and there's so few egg donor banks that there's really no competition, because it's a seller's market, it's not a buyer's market. So they just don't have to give you that information, because they know you'll take the donors anyway. Click thumbs up on the like button if you're enjoying this video and finding it helpful, because that will actually encourage YouTube to show this to other women like you who are interested in finding an egg donor. So at the time, back then, at the end of 2020, when I was choosing my egg donor, really all you could see was some adult photos of each donor and sometimes some child photos of them. One of the things that's totally bizarre is that the photos are not natural photos. So when you choose a sperm donor, you see a 6-year-old boy. That's the natural boy. But when you see an egg donor photo, it's a 25-year-old woman. Often they've had Botox, they've had their eyebrows done, they've had their lips enlarged, they've had a nose job, they've usually dyed their hair, or there's something, and they're doing a selfie and they're going, and they're catching themselves in the most beautiful angle. And it's so frustrating, because you're not actually seeing what the actual genetics looks like. So I was just so grateful if there was ever a picture that was just a natural snapshot someone had taken when the woman wasn't wearing all makeup and pouting and doing a selfie angle, because then you could actually see what the woman looked like. And I was extremely grateful if they ever had a photo of them as a child, because obviously as a child they haven't altered their appearance yet. And just a few like one-line sentences about their interests and hobbies, like not much, like I like pizza, I like hiking. That was it. Not like the sperm donors where they write all these essays in their own words. It's just like, I like pizza, I like tacos. And you could see in a little bit more detail their family medical history, which obviously is important. But there was no voice recordings or essays or any of the things you would get at a sperm bank. And most importantly, they didn't list the donor's age, and they didn't list whether the donor was a smoker or had drunk alcohol or what kind of diet they ate or anything like that. So all the things that go towards someone's egg quality, because really the health of the pregnancy and the baby is all coming down to the quality of the egg. That's why we're using donor eggs, because our own eggs aren't viable for whatever reason. So we want to choose an egg that's going to be good quality. So preferably we would like a young donor, and we certainly wouldn't want a donor who's been smoking and drinking and eating junk food the whole life, but there was just no way to find that out because it wasn't listed. So what I realized was if I liked a donor, I would actually write to the World Egg Bank and ask these questions myself separately, because none of that was listed on the website. It also didn't list if the donor already had children or if she donated eggs and it had led to any other births, which sometimes can be proof that her egg quality is good if they've led to other children. They didn't have even that information. So these were all things I had to ask myself by email. So I'm telling you this because if you're in this situation and the egg bank you're using doesn't have any of this information in its egg bank catalog online, just make sure to email the egg bank yourself and ask these questions because they're important questions. So since really all I had to go on were these pictures of the donors and a few lines about whether they like pizza, I thought, okay, I'll try and search on donors that at least look a bit like me, that either they're tall or they've got blonde hair or light brown hair or they've got green eyes or they've got a similar face shape to me or just something I could cling to that I was choosing a donor that had some connection to me. And also because, you know, having a child that's a double donor baby, that's hard enough for them. I thought it would make it easier for my child if they at least looked a little bit like me and so they weren't constantly getting questions about their parentage. So the first time I really looked properly at this website was in early December 2020. And at that time, I only found one donor on their website, a Caucasian donor that satisfied the Australian requirements, that looked even a tiny bit like me in some way. And so I wrote straight away to the donor coordinator and she said that egg donor had already been in contact with another recipient and was basically not available anymore. And I was like, no, that was the only one on the whole website. So I just decided to wait and keep checking back every few days to see if they had added any new egg donors because, you know, I wanted to start my cycle in February, or March, so I really needed to choose my donor pretty quickly. But it wasn't a massive rush. I knew I had maybe a month up my sleeve to keep looking. She's pulling her hair. She loves like doing this with one hair. She pulls one hair from her head into it. So a couple of weeks passed and I looked again. Now we're towards the end of December. And this time I decided to just like drop my standards and just like look for donors that even have like the tiniest link to me in any kind of way that I could find. And I found a few of those. And so I wrote to the World Egg Bank liaison woman. I sent her those few donor numbers that I'd found, like even the slightest connection to me in some way, like maybe they were tall or something. And I just asked her all those questions. Had they had any other children, or had they any successful births from their eggs? You know, did they smoke? Did they drink? Things like that. And their age. Because for me, the age was the most important thing. Because the thing is, I had made a decision to give up trying again with my own eggs because my own eggs were old. And I knew that trying again with 47-year-old eggs would really be like a roulette wheel. It would be like a roller coaster ride, especially if I got pregnant. I'd be wondering the whole time, am I going to have a miscarriage? I felt like I was giving up my own biological child to have some certainty and some sense of peace of mind during my pregnancy if I used a donor egg. But for that to happen, it needed to be a young donor egg, because the reality is egg quality is all about the age of the egg. So I really wanted a donor under 25 if possible. That was my goal. That was my number one goal in this process. Who's that in the mirror? A little koala. Is it in the mirror? A little koala. The World Egg Bank liaison woman wrote back to me that they didn't have any personality tests or any essays or any audio files or anything like that. But she said all their donors had met with their psychologist, and the psychologist had determined that they had not really smoked or drunk alcohol much, or had terrible diets, and if they had been smokers and drinkers, they wouldn't have allowed them into the egg donor program. So that was reassuring to hear that. And so she went through the few donors I had sent her, the donor numbers, and it turned out they were all unavailable. Either they had already been chosen for someone else, or they were not compliant with Australian law. And the other reason some of them weren't available to me is that they weren't compatible with the particular package that I had chosen to pay for with the World Egg Bank. So basically, I chose a particular package. I can't remember now what it was called, but it's the one that guarantees you 2 embryos. So you pay a little bit extra and they guarantee you're going to get 2 good day 5 embryos out of it. So basically they'll do the first attempt, fertilize the egg with the sperm with 6 eggs. If no good embryos come out of it, then they'll take another 6 eggs and try again with the same donor. And if again the fertilization doesn't work and doesn't lead to 2 good embryos, then they'll let you choose a second egg donor and they'll try again until you get your 2 embryos. So that was the package that I wanted to choose, even though it was a little bit more expensive, because I felt like I'm going through all of this. I just want to get 2 good embryos out of it. It's worth it for me to pay extra. As it turned out, they actually got 3 good embryos on the very first attempt with the egg donor I chose. So I definitely chose the right egg donor and I chose the right sperm donor because it worked the first time. I didn't actually need that guarantee, but I'm still glad I had it, because for me in my life, everything is about peace of mind. The more peace of mind I have, the more relaxed I am, the easier things flow for me in my life. So it was absolutely worth paying that extra to have that peace of mind of that guarantee. But as it turned out, in the egg donor choosing process, it made it a little bit harder because not all of the donors were allowed to be used for that particular payment option of the embryo guarantee. I don't know why, but they obviously allocate different donors to the different packages that they have. Do share this video with any other women you know who are on an IVF journey, particularly if they're trying to use an egg donor, because there's lots of little tidbits and helpful information I'm sharing in this video that might be really useful for that. So I was told that new donors were being added to their catalogue all the time and that I should keep looking and that I should try again next year in the early new year. But I decided to go back and just look again, and this time to really open my mind. My whole journey with having this baby has been about opening my mind. My original plan was always to have a baby with a husband who I loved, to be married, and to have my own biological child. And I had to open my mind and do this as a single mother by choice using a sperm donor. And then I found that I couldn't use my own eggs and had to open my mind to an egg donor. And now I was like, okay, I'm opening my mind that the child's not going to look like me. So be it. I just want to get an egg donor. I just want to get an egg so I can start this process, because I was already 47. I was starting to come up to my 48th birthday. I didn't want to wait another year. I was like running out of time. For me, it was like, oh well, I'm just going to see what egg donors they have, and that's who I'm going to go with. You might be saying, hang on, your baby looks exactly like you, but I'm not at the end of the story yet. I'm not at the end of the story yet. So until this point, I'd been really trying to find something physically that looked like me, like maybe they were tall, or maybe they had light brown hair or dark blonde hair, or a similar oval face or small eyes or a big smile or something that looked like me. So now I just threw that all out the window. I looked at every donor. I looked at women with dark hair, with small smiles, with different kinds of noses, who were short. I mean, I'm 5'9". I looked at short women, I looked at women with completely different body types, different face shapes, different colouring. I just looked at all of them. Any donor that I could get that would satisfy the Australian requirements. Obviously, I didn't know their age, but I was hoping that I could just give a list and say, tell me all of their ages, and I would just choose the youngest one, and that would be that. But in that process, I did see one. I did glance at one who I thought, I actually really like her. It's such a shame she doesn't look like me, because I actually really like her. She was just really, really sweet. She had a really sweet, loving face. Not stunningly beautiful, not plain, but just like loving. She just looked kind, and she looked full of joy. And I really liked, you know, the little bit of information I had about her. She was like 5'1", and she had red hair, and she had a heart-shaped face. She didn't look anything like me. But, you know, I thought, she's the only one I like in terms of her personality and her interests and things, and I get a good feeling from her. So, okay, she doesn't look like me, so be it. I'm going to just write to the egg donor liaison woman and just find out her age and if she's available before I even get excited about it. So I'm going to pull out my notes and read this to you. On the 18th of December 2020, I wrote this to the woman at the World Egg Bank. Hi, I'm wondering if donor XXX is still available and whether she will be a premium donor that I can use here in Australia. Also, how old is she? Do you know if her eggs have led to any pregnancies or live births? Does she have any children of her own? Do you have any other information about her at all? Thanks. And she wrote back a few days later, great timing with this donor. She just had her egg retrieval last week, so she has eggs ready. This is her first retrieval, so I unfortunately do not have anything to offer with success rates. She's 22 years old and has no children yet. Please let me know if you'd like to move forward with her. 22 years old! I was like, oh my God, this totally sweet young girl is 22 years old. Like at that point, remember, I'd let go of everything else other than donor's age. So I was like, wow, super excited. But then the next day, a new donor came onto the World Egg Bank site, and this one looked like me. I mean, she was tall, she was broad-shouldered, she had dark blonde hair, light brown hair, she had blue or green eyes, she had oval shape. She was a writer, I'm a writer. She was very empathetic. We had similar personality traits. It was like, on paper, this was my perfect donor. And I was like, hey, forget the short redhead, he doesn't look anything like me. I'm going to find out about this new donor. I'm going to find out. So I wrote to the donor liaison woman at the World Egg Bank about this new donor who had turned up, who looked so much like me. And she wrote back, yes, this donor's available, but she's 31 years old. And in that moment, I really got clear on what was the most important thing to me. Donor who looks like me or donor who's 22 years old who doesn't look anything like me. And I chose the young donor because at this point, like I was 47, I was almost 48, I didn't have years to waste to keep trying and trying and trying. I just wanted it to be successful. And I know that the age of the egg is so important for the egg quality, for the chances of there being any genetic abnormalities or miscarriages or things like that. And I just realized, oh, well, she doesn't look like me, he doesn't look like me, it's okay. They're not genetically related to me, it's okay if they don't look like me. I'm going to go with the donor that has the most chance of success. I just wanted it to work. Now, I'm not saying you can't be successful with an older egg donor. Many people are. Many people are successful egg donors much older than 31. But for me, I knew that in order to allow myself to give up trying again with my own genetics, I had to have this trade-off. It was like, okay, if I give up my own genetics, I'm going for the youngest possible egg donor. That was what felt right for me, so that I would have peace of mind and feel like it was worth giving that up, worth letting go of my dream of my own biological child. So I thought, okay, I'm probably going to go with the young donor. Let's just look at her one more time. That's when something amazing happened. Before, I hadn't really looked that closely because I still wasn't that convinced I wanted to go with a redheaded short donor. But at this point, I actually looked more closely at all of her photos because she had quite a lot of photos in her portfolio. One of the main differences actually between the sperm donor choice process and this process was that with the sperm donors, it was just 1 or 2 pictures of the donors as a child, whereas for some reason with the egg donors, you see lots of photos of them as an adult. And I suddenly saw that she wasn't a redhead. Her hair was dyed red! Her actual hair was not that much darker than mine. I'd say it was light brown, and my hair is dark blonde. So it's like 1 or 2 shades darker than my hair. And actually my niece, my sister's daughter, has hair that's light brown, exactly the same as that. She actually looked a little bit like my niece in her colouring. She had green eyes, my niece had green eyes, I have green eyes, and she had light brown hair, my niece has light brown hair. So I was like, oh, she doesn't look like me, she looks a little bit like my niece. And then I looked at her face shape and I suddenly realised, Actually, all the cousins on my mother's side have heart-shaped faces, and she actually has a little bit of the same look as my cousins. So she actually looks a little bit familiar to me. That might be why I liked her picture so much, because she actually looks a little bit like my cousins. And then I looked even closer and I actually started to cry because I realized when I really looked at her face, even though it was completely different to my face, see, I had been trying to find someone who looked like me. I realized her eyes, she had quite deep set eyes with big eyelids, like my mum. My mum had really big eyelids and big, beautiful eyes. I don't. I've got little squinty hooded eyes, but my mum had big eyes with big eyelids. This donor had eyes like my mum. I was like, oh my God, her eyes are like my mum. Her face shape is like my cousin's, and her coloring is like my niece. She looks like my family. She doesn't look like me, but she looks like my family. And that was a little piece of connection I needed. I just needed something to connect me to her other than her age. And the other thing I realized is her interests are very similar to mine. So, I don't know, I just started to feel more and more right that this was the right donor, even though she was short, she didn't look anything like me. And so, yeah, I just became clearer and clearer that this was my donor. And really, the very first time I'd ever seen her photo, I loved her photo. I felt like she was full of joy. I had just dismissed her because my mind said, don't choose a redhead, don't choose someone who's short, choose someone who looks like you. So this is why it's a really interesting process choosing a donor. Sometimes you want to listen to your mind, but sometimes you just have to listen to your intuition, to your heart, to your higher knowing. I had such a good feeling the first time I saw that donor's photo. My mind dismissed it because it didn't match what I thought I was looking for. It's kind of like when you're dating and you have this list in your head of what your perfect man is, and you meet some other guy who doesn't match that, but your heart just opens to him and you have this amazing connection with him. He's nothing like what you ever imagined. It was a bit like that with this donor. My heart knew the very first time I saw her picture, the redheaded picture. I was like, oh, she's adorable. I felt that. And also, there were a couple of photos of this girl when she was a child. And she did look a little bit like my niece as a child, like different face shape and everything, but the same colouring, and she was very, very cute as a child, so I really liked those pictures. By the way, if you have any questions about any of the stuff I'm sharing in this video, about choosing an egg donor or anything about IVF or anything about any of this, please leave the question in the comments below and I'll answer it in the comments, or I might even make a video answering your question. Because I just want to help you guys, I just want to be of service. The thing that actually impressed me the most about this egg donor, more than how sweet she was or how cute she was or the fact that we had all these interests in common or that she looked like my family, was actually the fact that she was a 22-year-old woman who had decided she did not want to have children, but she actually wanted to help somebody else in the world and give her eggs as a gift for no money, on conditions that she's an open ID donor, that the child can contact her at age 18, that she's willing to do 2 counseling sessions, put herself through IVF, injections, egg retrieval surgery, general anesthetic, all of that, just from the goodness of her own heart to help someone. She's doing that at age 22. I mean, that just blew my mind. It's like, that just blew my heart open. That was like, what an amazing young girl. I'm so grateful to her. I'm so grateful to her. Like, it's only because she had that generosity that I was able to have this beautiful baby. And when I think about the round of IVF that I did, it's not easy doing those injections every single day at the right time. It's scary going under general anesthetic. You don't feel great the next day. You feel a bit sore for a few days. Like, she did that for me, for us, for some woman she'd never met, out of the goodness of her heart. And that ultimately was one of the reasons why I picked her, because I was like, anyone who's doing that at age 22 for no money, just for altruistic reasons, is an amazing human, and I just love this girl. So that was really one of the most important reasons why I picked her. So I wrote to the woman at the World Egg Bank. I said, this is the donor I want. Yay. And everybody was excited, but then there was just one little hurdle I had to jump over. I said, please send me her full genetic report, because the thing is, I have to compare it to the sperm donor's report, because I'd already chosen a sperm donor who I absolutely loved, and I didn't want to change him because he was like perfect in every way and I loved him. You can see in the other video I made that I've linked above, and I'll also put a link in the description box. And the thing is, all donors have some sort of genetic abnormalities. They're usually some tiny obscure thing that's not going to be a problem. But it becomes a problem if both the sperm donor and the egg donor have the same condition. So you actually have to check that. You have to check that they don't. You have to check they're compatible with each other. So I was just sort of waiting on bated breath to get this full genetic report for this egg donor and just check if she didn't have the same conditions that the sperm donor had. I mean, it's a crazy thing because, like, in real life, you can't ask a man that during having sex with him, hey, what conditions genetically do you have? Because no one knows their genetic conditions unless they've done 23andMe and they've memorized them. But in this process, you can see it on paper and you can compare it. So I waited with bated breath. On the 29th of December 2020, the woman sent the genetic report to me, and I looked, and they did not have the same conditions. They were compatible, genetically compatible. Yes, your donors were compatible. So we had chosen our egg donor. And if you're someone who's considering having a baby using an egg donor, or you've already got an egg donor baby, definitely subscribe to this channel, because I make a video every week and I often share what it's like having a baby that's a double donor baby in my videos. And when you subscribe, make sure to click the little notification button so that YouTube tells you when I've uploaded a video, because otherwise you won't know. So on the 5th of January 2021, I signed the contract with the egg donor who was 22, short, with the red hair that was dyed red. And I have been so happy with that choice ever since. Every time I look at the picture of my egg donor, I look at the picture of my sperm donor, I just feel so happy. I feel so full of joy. Both of them are just such loving, kind, caring, amazing humans. Their pictures radiate joy. I feel so happy every time I look at their pictures. I know I made the right decisions. And then when she came out of my room and grew into this little sweetest little angel koala baby that you can see right here, you know I made the right choice. You know I made the right choice. And you know, they didn't look like me. Neither of them looked like me, other than the sperm donor who was tall and had fair hair. But he had a completely different face shape to me. The donor had brown hair. She was short, she had a heart-shaped face. Somehow this little baby has come out looking quite like me at the moment. Who knows what will happen when she's older. So that's just a little plot twist that I didn't think was going to happen. I didn't expect that at all. It's been an amazing thing. But more than that, she's just the sweetest little angel. She's so happy-go-lucky. She's just she's a pleasure to be with all day, every day. I'm loving being her mother. And I'm so grateful to this egg donor. I'm so grateful for the choice she made, for the gift she gave me. What an incredible thing. If you ever happen to watch this, if you're out there, I love you. I'm so grateful to you. Thank you so much. So that's how I chose my egg donor. Obviously, every woman's going to have a very different journey of choosing her egg donor. However you choose your egg donor is right for you. You'll probably have a completely different process than I had and completely different criteria than I had. And that's totally fine. But I just really wanted to share my process with you and how I made my decision. And hopefully something in this video has been helpful for you. I'm soon going to make a video about what it was like being pregnant with a double donor baby, with an egg donor baby. So definitely watch that video. Once it's made, I'll put it here for you to watch. Big love to all you mamas and all you future mamas. We're sending you so much love, so much baby dust. Bye.